Hello, everyone. My name is Ian McDonald. I'm a reader in film practice at Film CultureLab in Newcastle University, and I'm also the degree program director for our two undergraduate programs, the BA Film Practices and the BA Film and Media. And I'm really happy to introduce two of our students to talk to us today about Black Lives Matter, about racism, and about filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking. So briefly, just to introduce them, but they can also say a little bit about themselves. We have Dami Fawehinmi, who is a second year student, second year combined honours student. So she is doing the film and media, the documentary practice part of the film and media strand, plus other subjects. And we have Warren Brown Headley, who is also a first year student. Warren's a first year student, BA Film Practices program. So it's great to welcome you, Dami and Warren, to this, and really happy you're kind of up for discussing what is become, you know, probably the most important issue that's really affecting us today. And you know, and this has obviously a long history and a long legacy, which we can talk about, but I guess its immediate roots are in, actually, you could say in COVID in some ways. It's the whole kind of situation that's occurred with the coronavirus disease, which has disproportionately affected Black and ethnic minorities. And that's caused a lot of tension and raised a lot of questions. And then on the back of that, of course, we had the brutal murder of George Floyd when was it, May 25th in the US, which sparked, you know, this first of all within the States, but then internationally, this kind of movement, this rising up of anger and amongst not just the Black community, but amongst the Black and white community. And that's kind of obviously, you know, and we're living through that at the moment, and that's provoked all sorts of debates and arguments about the nature of racism, about the experience of within our Black community, and about how we go forward in our response to this. And I know that both of you have been very much involved in discussions, in debates, in organizations, seeking to move things forward, and which is fantastic. But today, the discussion, I thought it would be really good if we could focus it around, you know, a number of things really, around what the Black Lives Matter movement means to you, how it's changed things from your perspective, and then let's relate that to film and the whole process of filmmaking and of studying film at the university. And then hopefully we'll have time also to think about the future for you as students, but also what we think, what we would like to see as emerging out of, or as a response to you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. So maybe we just start by, you know, Dami and Warren, if you just want to just say a little bit about yourselves, introduce yourself. We should say that Dami's having some problems with her video, so we just have a rather wonderful still of her staring down at us. But she's very much there. So maybe just introduce yourselves just a little bit, and then we can start the conversation proper. So Dami, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I am a combined honours student and I'm in second year. I'm part of societies like ACS, LGBT, I signed up to Film Soc as well. Just anything that kind of allows me to connect with creativity and helping, you know, societies and groups kind of become more diverse if they kind of forget that kind of thing. But yeah, in regards to Black Lives Matter and things like that, it's been quite because it's always something that we experienced from like the first day of our lives. So when you see the world kind of waking up to it, you're kind of just like, okay, more people need to get on this, and you need to make sure that the institutions that you're part of are also getting on with this. Because I think my biggest thing is that even looking at from like a financial point of view, you have students coming in from all over the world and, you know, leaving their homes, and you want to make sure that they're in safe environments. And I think when you're the only Black woman in the room, or there's another Black person in the room with you, but everyone else looks the same, you kind of feel a bit disjointed. So it's really important to make sure that those students feel connected, even though they may be the minority in the situation. And, you know, taking on accountability in these institutions as well is important, because things aren't going to get better if no one changes stuff from the very bottom to go to the very top. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is definitely talking about the change and then actually making the change come true. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dami. And we'll certainly come back to that, about the whole question of, you know, the impact and how we change things. But first, Warren, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no problem. My name's Warren. I'm a first year student. I do BA film practices, and I'm the secretary for Stand Up to Racism at the university. And yeah, I guess our aims are just to, my aim as well as our aim is just to have a campus, have a more inclusive, have a more diverse, have a more representative campus in general. And as Dami was saying, to empower to work with the Black Lives Matter movement so that we can see the changes actually come to fruition that we want to see, and making those changes concrete and very clear for people to understand. So that's
great. Okay, good. I'm interested to know your interest in I know we're talking about Black Lives Matter, but we're also talking about how, you know, we're talking about the programs that you're on as students. So I'm just interested to know kind of what your, you know, how did you get interested in film? What were your influences, your favorite films, your favorite filmmakers? You want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, my interest in anything visual kind of started when I was much younger, because I'm a photographer, so I was always obsessed with kind of still art first of all. And then when I was, because my dad, he's like absolutely obsessed with films, that would kind of be our thing. So as I got older and I could start picking what subjects I wanted to do in secondary and sixth form, being able to create short visual videos, so kind of like music videos, but because back then it was very much you just needed to do a project at school and it was quite small. But then once I towards the end of sixth form, I was able to do more creative projects. And then once I got to uni, I was like, okay, I definitely want to study this and do it practically. But some of my biggest inspirations, I think, was Shonda Rhimes and Issa Rae. So Shonda Rhimes actually created Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder. And it's like you're able to see yourself on the screen and relate to some of these characters, especially for Black women. And Issa Rae created Insecure, which is extremely relatable because it talks about the young Black women's experience. So having shows and films by these creators, it's very much like there's a narrative to be told, and that's what inspired me to study film, because it was like I didn't, when it comes to the actual practicality of it, of filming, that's funnily enough not my strong suit. It's more like directing and visualizing it into coming to the concept, but I'm still obsessed with filmmaking and studying the course and things like that. But what inspires me to keep going is just knowing that even though there are so many Black creators, we're not able to see them because mainstream media, Hollywood, they're not promoting it as much. So it's very much continuously trying to create as much content as I can that talks about the Black experience, and also, you know, hoping that anywhere I go, it's kind of like, can we include these Black directors, because they've existed from the beginning of time, you know. So yeah, that's it. That's for me. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's interesting. And what about for you, Warren? What is how did you get into film, and what are your influences and your inspirations?
I mainly got into film. I wasn't like always as like a creative person, most of my friends, they would have just said, oh yeah, I would have done sciences, like I did sciences at A-level, and history. But throughout, I used to have like a basketball YouTube channel, and we'd go around, me and my friend, we ran the channel together. We'd we'd film our games and like make highlights of the games. We had like a series called 5 a.m. basketball, where like we'd have to wake up at like 4:30 so that we could go and play basketball because there were no basketball courts around. And then I just started really enjoying like making them, and then eventually just making the videos because I'd never had like a creative thing to do. And then I made the first documentary I ever made was, it was on like this team called Brent Ballers. And I watched it and it's terrible. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. And then we kept going with the Nothing But Net channel, and it was starting to pick up like some speed. But then I had GCSEs, but then we released a documentary on there called Work, which has like, it's not much. It's like 4,000 views or something. But for at the time, it was on Andrew, the guy who played basketball. But at the time, I was like, oh, that was crazy. And then from there, it was just enjoyable to think of something in my head, film it, and then come to the editing room and make it a real thing, and then other people seeing it. So that was, and then just seeing other filmmakers. It was mostly on YouTube, really, because there was the early filmmakers, the VFX artists on there were like big inspiration for me. To like, yeah, those were my main inspiration. I was never the kind of person to just like sit down and just watch films like all the time. I'd watch films of other YouTubers, which now I look at them and they're like, it's not that good. But it was that inspiration of like, do it yourself kind of creativity, like just put it together and just make things and think about how you make them, how you can make them better. And
it's interesting. It's I mean, I think both of your responses kind of reflects both probably how most students will be, the motivation for most students has been reflected in what you've said, but also the specific experiences of race and racism, I think also come through, particularly, when Dami talks about it being a means of creative expression, but the form and the preoccupation of that creative expression then becomes around representation because of the obvious lack of representation of particularly Black women in the creative field. So it kind of enters into these choices as well, doesn't it? And I think with Warren, I kind of picked up the idea. Yeah, I mean, it's like that buzz of connecting with people. Film becomes a very effective way of obviously YouTube is the main way of kind of making that instant connection with people, and therefore as a tool of communication, it's very, very powerful. So yeah, I mean, but when you were then thinking about coming to university, and specifically coming to do a film program, and I don't know if you looked anywhere else, seriously considered going anywhere else, but obviously Newcastle was featured and was ultimately the choice that you made. Did it come into your mind at all about what it might be like? I mean, I don't know the kind of demographics of where you live and where you were brought up, but did it occur to you that you would be one of the very few Black students on this program? Was that a factor that entered into your mind, or not? I don't know who wants to take that first. Just jump in, whoever wants to.
Dami.
Okay. Yeah, so I grew up in Southeast London, which when I was there in primary school was majority Black people. And then I moved to Essex when I was about 7, and I was about maybe 3 out of 1,000 Black. Oh, so I was 3 Black kids, one of 3 Black kids out of 1,000 students. So it was a massive shift for me to be like, suddenly, everything about you is celebrated, and then you have people telling you to change things as you are from a very young age that you can't really control. But now today we know that as racism. I'm older, so I know it was a racist experience, but it was very much as I got older, I wanted to surround myself with as much as my culture and my heritage as I can, because, you know, when my area is a lot more diverse today than it was about 10 or over 10 years ago since I've lived here. But it's still very much like you can go into the town and you can find the food that your culture serves, and you can see other Black people all the time. But I knew moving up north was something that people close to me was a bit worried and nervous about, because it's very much, you know, you're gonna probably not see any Black people, and how are you gonna connect to things like that. So what kind of definitely made me feel safe was I was actually supposed to come to Newcastle University in 2017, but I missed by 1 grade. So I had to do a BTEC photography course to get back in. And in that year before, I'd made friends that were a year ahead of me. So they would tell me how good the ACS community is and how that kind of feels like a home away from home. So even though Newcastle isn't as diverse as your home in London or Essex may be, you can be connected around these people. So for me, that was very much like, okay, I'm definitely going to go forward with this. I love the course. I'm going to find my people. We'll just work around that. But I was quite surprised, if I'm honest, when I got to Newcastle for the open day. And it is, for the North, it's still, you know, not as, you know, diverse because it's the North. London, but when I was out and about in the city, I did see quite a few Black people. So for me, that was very much like, I was quite a metropolitan area. So everything would be kind of fine, I guess. But yeah, when I got into my actual course, it was like I was the only Black person there, I think. And then, because I studied 2 other courses in combined honours, it was like you could, as soon as you walk in, you could just see where the Black people was. That's how much we stuck out. So it was quite daunting at first before I made friends with my Black friends in my media class, because it was very much, you know, it's kind of going back to my first day at school when I moved to Essex, to that whole, you're kind of the minority again, and even more at this point. But yeah, as I've been there for about 2 years now, it's very much, you just find your people and you start to feel way more comfortable. But that doesn't mean that racial experiences still haven't happened to me while I was at the uni. And there's still quite a bit to be done in that regard.
Okay, hopefully we'll come back onto that, Dami, it'd be good to talk about that a bit more. But what was your take, Warren? What was your kind of sense of it all before you came here?
It was mainly like, for me, I came on clearance, so I was like, okay, what is the best place for me to do film? And I was like, okay, for me to feel, I don't know, feel like it was the best place just to do film. Like the consideration, I knew it was going to be all white. I knew it was going to be, but like I don't know. There's in my life, like I've just been around white people all the time, and had racist incidents just all the time, like just countless. I'm sure Dami has as well, like just countless things. And I think at some point I got, I guess, I'm not sure that's how you use the word, just inoculated against it. I was just like, okay, this is going to continue to happen, and I'm going to need to put myself in a position whereby I can try and make some form of change in the future. And that's why I joined Stand Up to Racism eventually. But I just, it was just more, to me, it was just more about like, okay, the situation that we're currently in is terrible. And I was just like, okay, this is just going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to happen. And the only thing that I can do is just be a part of the change. That was just how I was thinking about it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to ask, before sort of looking into in more depth at some of these experiences, just about documentary filmmaking, because we've been talking generally about film, but is there something about documentary filmmaking that appeals to you, or was it just the idea of filmmaking? Dami, because you came in on combined honours, so yeah, I'd be interested to know how much, because you would have chosen these modules only once you've arrived, right? Or unless you came with it with clear understanding that you wanted to do film. And so,
I'd chosen my modules before I came in, but the thing I loved most about it was that it just seemed there was a lot of, obviously it was still being taught because that's the whole point of it, but it seemed like there was a lot of maybe control that we could be given. So it'd be very much like you have to film about this, but the topic can be wherever you want, and that's something I really loved about it. So it just gave me the outlet to be like, okay, I'm going to talk about this. Or because one of my friends, he's a drag queen, so we did a little short documentary towards the end of year 1, and it was basically like a day in the life of a drag queen, and stuff like that is just, you know, creating narratives that people don't see, because he's a Black drag queen and that's not very popular in the LGBT community. So it's very much like, I want to create narratives for everybody because everyone's story deserves to be told. But yeah, that's very much what pulled me towards studying documentary, was that freedom of it. Yeah.
Then Dami, as one of the lecturers, I have a bone to pick with you. Then why didn't you choose to do film? Why combined honours? You should be doing more film, right? You should be on our course properly, not as a combined honours student. Sorry to combined honours, but you know.
No, it was I think it was because I don't know if I might be completely wrong when I say this, please correct me if I am, but okay. I don't know, can film students who just do film, can they do a placement year or a year abroad kind of thing? Because I want to do a placement year.
Yeah, actually all university students are entitled to do a year placement abroad or wherever. They all are entitled. No, I'm not sure if it's abroad, but you're all entitled to take a year out.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that, because that's the reason why I chose combined honours, because it let me do that placement year. So if I'd known that, then I probably would have. But because I do business with it,
we should get our communication sharper, obviously. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But because I studied media and business, it was very much like getting my love for film, my love for media, my love for business, and just roll with it. But I actually had no idea that any course could do that.
Yeah, you can, but it sounds like a good package of stuff that you're doing there anyway.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So, Warren, documentary. Is it documentary that your passion is there, or is it fiction?
Documentary more than fiction, definitely. Fiction can be. It can be. I think it can be fun. In the sense that you can exaggerate some parts of reality and put them kind of at the forefront, whereas it would be a lot harder to tease it out within documentary, to kind of emphasize it and like dramatize it, which really puts it at the forefront. But documentary was more about connecting with people, and because one of the passions was, the reason why I started to have a passion for it was me and one of my friends made a documentary called No Comment. We went to it was UKSCM protests and like Extinction Rebellion protests, and filmed a documentary of one of the protests. We just followed him throughout the day. And then they're like scenes of us like on London Bridge. They closed down the entirety of London Bridge. They were marching like from Parliament Square all the way around. They were just closing stuff off. And then the guy got arrested at the end of it. We just had no clue, and he just got arrested. We're like, oh, what? It was crazy, and it was just such like it was quite a surreal experience, because it just wasn't something that happened. You just see London Bridge just empty. This is one of and we're just like, whoa. And just thinking about just having experiences like that, and with the UCU documentary that we're still going to be filming, just
Just want to explain that because people won't know what that is, the UCU documentary.
Oh, yeah. We another student called Joe and Finn, we're filming a documentary on the UCU strikes that recently happened, and through that we kind of connected with the lecturer community, which isn't something that I don't know. I think most students, not most students, but that most students do very much. And it was really fun. It was really insightful. It was really interesting, and it was just it was nice to connect with people and see their views of the world and understand them. And and that's why I like doing documentary mainly, to get the stories. That just as Dami was saying, get the stories of people and groups of people, as well, movements of people, and put them out there so people understand them. Definitely.
So that just leads me to ask: do you think that your experiences, particularly as you know, as Black people, gives you a particular orientation to the kinds of films that you might want to do, or a kind of insight, access that might be not even come on the radar of somebody who isn't Black or who hasn't had those experiences? I mean, there is a kind of this question is leading to another question about, you know, kind of whether there are stories that are not being told, whether there are groups or communities that we don't hear about, partly because the documentary filmmaking community in this country, by and large, you know, it's still very white. It's difficult to think of. There are hundreds and hundreds of Black documentary filmmakers in this country.
Yeah.
You were one of them, right? Both of you are doing it. But if you try and think of high-profile, established Black documentary filmmakers in this country, it's very difficult to come up with names. You know, or there are individuals, and you know, people like John Akomfa, of course, are very, very well known, and others, but some often working in the gallery space, which is quite interesting. But do you know what I mean? I'm talking about kind of you know, the Nick Broomfields or the Louis Theroux's. You know, where are those kind of Black people? So my question then, there was a two-parter. The first part was about that experience of, you know, of being Black and the kind of experiences you have and the insights that gives you, whether that leads to certain kind of stories that otherwise would not be told. Do you think that's a fair statement, you know, or not? Dami, sorry, I had to keep asking Dami because we can't see her, whether she, you know, wants to respond. So,
Warren, I don't mind if you take this one. I just want to think about my answer for a second.
Yeah, no problem. I'd say in the sense that it's a different perception of society, because we understand the history of our skin and how that has led us to be viewed within society. The view that we in turn have of society is shifted. It cannot fundamentally, it can't be the same as a white person, as a and somebody from Asia or wherever. It's fundamentally can't be the same. They're all different views. So I would definitely say that it gives it might I guess it would, it means that I'll speak for myself, want to bring up the voices of oppressed peoples in general, a tendency towards that because of that view of society, because of our the separate view of it.
Yeah, there is a sense in which every film that we do, any film that document, is a reflection of themselves in some way. Even though we might not feel it's about us, actually it is in some way. There's always a reflection of self in that. So yeah, I don't know if you've got a response to that, Dami.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Each person's story and how they're going to tell it is going to be completely different, and that deserves to be, you know, respected and pushed up and things like that. For me, it was when I started to get into like understanding documentaries, or people, it would be the people that you saw on the screen would be like Stacey Dooley, Reggie Yates kind of thing, Louis Theroux kind of things. And as I got older, I started to wonder why aren't there more Black people on the screen? And you'd have to find them, like BBC Three. I remember they used to have so many diverse documentary filmmakers. But then after they removed it from TV and you could only access it online, it was very much like all the stories that minority groups had to say weren't as important, because if you were going to make a giant documentary, it would be on BBC One. So then people would kind of turn to Channel 4, and I was actually mentored at Channel 4, and they'd take in a lot of Black filmmakers who, you know, didn't really know which way they wanted to go and learn more. And it was really nice to kind of see these platforms sharing different stories. But today it's like I know a lot more Black documentary makers, but it's still very much down to mainstream media not giving them a platform that they deserve, because it's almost just like this one that I watched on how Black women are more likely to die during childbirth, and it was so interesting and it was so educational, but you know, you don't see it on TV, you can only watch it online, and it's very much like it needs to be more accessible. And you can, not so much as a word of saying you need to force people to watch this, but if you have like a country like Britain that's majority white and a large portion of people are watching shows on BBC kind of thing, you need to put it where they're going to find it, because a lot of people they won't take the time to educate themselves, which is completely their responsibility. But on the other flip side of that, we also need to make sure that these institutions are doing as much as they can to put that educational media out there. So it's definitely the responsibility of BBC to be like, why are we only producing white documentaries? Why are we only showing a white narrative? You know, you need to go and find these documentary filmmakers that do exist and always have, and kind of be like, hey, here's a documentary about Black women in childbirth that you need to learn about, because this is institutionalized medical racism. Put it on the thing, put it on prime time, and kind of create this whole, the narrative is important, the narrative needs to be shared, which is definitely something I agree with, yeah.
So in terms, bring up some more to your current experiences though. I mean, can you know, the Black Lives Matter movement is, you know, on a scale that probably, you know, we haven't seen probably since the late 60s. Even the riots in the early 80s were a particular expression of discontent. This is global, and this is in some sense multiracial as well. And you know, you do get the sense that it's kind of affected everything. And it's a conversation now that people are having. Can you just talk about your experiences as Black students at Newcastle University studying documentary, sort of before the Black Lives Matter movement, and kind of how things have now, you feel things have shifted with the Black Lives Matter movement? So I'm kind of interested in, you know, in how it was, you know, what it felt like for you, and what some of your experiences as Black students before, you know, the events of May, really. Do you want, again, I don't know if Dami wants to take that first, or you want to have a little, or Warren wants to jump in first?
I mean, I'll jump in. I guess before the Black Lives Matter movement, it was more about race wasn't something that was really discussed properly, in the sense that nobody, apart from Down to Race, and we had a few rallies, but there's still what, 20, how many people at Newcastle University? There's like
25,000 or something.
Yeah, 25,000 people, and we got 40 people to a rally, which is, we're really appreciative of that, obviously. But there's obviously a ways to go. There's so many people on campus who race must not even be for the ethnic minority on campus, it has to be. They don't have the choice for it not to be a thought in their mind. But for all of those other thousands of people, it's not big enough to do something about. And I think Black Lives Matter is the start to changing that, to make it omnipresent in the minds of people across campus, that this is a serious historical, economic, everything problem, an all-encompassing problem that you have been shielded against. And it's very important that people start to take action, and Black Lives Matter has emboldened people to start taking that action.
I mean, if I was to make a documentary on you too, for example, I know I would want, say, pose this question I just asked you as a kind of a documentary. I'd kind of want to know a bit about, what it felt like to be Dami and Warren, as students looking around, and what was some of the feelings that you had, and what were some of the ways in which you felt that racism was being expressed towards you, both, and because often people think that racism takes the form of, like we saw with George Floyd, or of Nazis on the street, but it's that kind of overt name calling or violence against the black body. But there are, we know that it's more complex and more varied and more ubiquitous in some ways than that. So I don't know if you can, I'm kind of interested in that. As a documentary filmmaker now, I want, we know the grand narrative, but I want the human story. So, tell me, because, what it felt like to you emotionally, physically, as a Dami?
I think for me, it was in first year. I remember I was actually, one of my mates, I think we were at the time the only two black people there. And there was a bit of an incident where I remember they put on a documentary which had lynching in it. And for me, that was quite upsetting, so I had to leave. And it was very much like, for the rest of the year went pretty smoothly, but it was kind of disheartening to not see any other representation of the black narrative other than that. So it was like all the films that we'd watched were by white documentary filmmakers, and the only kind of representation I would find is if I made the film myself, and then when we'd have to show the films in class every week. So when I got to year 2 and there was a bit more control over what you could make, I was hoping that there would be more of that narrative, but there wasn't really. So for me, it was just mostly hoping that, because it's all about who's, like, everyone's story deserves to be told kind of thing. And for me, it was that I definitely wanted to see when we'd be watching, because I remember class would be split up into 2 classes. So you'd have one where it was the lecture and you'd watch a film, and then the second one was more practical and you might watch a short 30-minute doc at the beginning. But yeah, for me, it was very much like, why aren't we watching any films made by black people? And also why that documentary in first year was shown. That, yeah, for me, that was quite a sad experience, I think. Yeah.
How did it make you feel, though, Dami?
I just think, because that particular week in which it had happened was, I had a lot going on that week. So I think I just remember leaving and just going home, and I was quite upset about it, because I was excited for the course, but to see that and there not be any trigger warning or anything like that, I was quite taken aback. And I remember just having to be with my friends that day and kind of things, but I didn't really, I think I'm confident enough to talk about it now, but because of how hard it was for me to get back into the university after my course, I was a bit fearful in talking about it, because not that it happened around me or at the university, but you've heard of students who speak up and then their grade is affected or they're kicked out. And for me, that was the worry at the back of my mind. I was like, if I go and tell the lecturer that upset me, would they mark me down? They wouldn't like me. So I didn't really feel confident in saying anything. But I think having this conversation is helpful because I come back next year September. So the goal would be hopefully for the new cohort that come, that they're able to see all kinds of stories. Yeah.
So interesting. Warren, what about you? To share something with us.
I'd say, let me think. I guess walking around town is something that's always quite interesting. That's always an experience. Because one thing that I think maybe Dami, you might be able to testify to this is that like kind of just the stares you might get.
Yeah.
Because you're just walking around doing whatever. You might just be going to the shops and people are just staring at you like you're just some alien being that's not supposed to be here. People, genuinely, I've had just people just stare at me. People have come up to me and said, well, about my hair. I let my hair grow out just a bit one time. And then I was just in Tesco, just waiting. I was just waiting for one of my friends to be done at the checkout. Somebody comes up to me, he's like, "Can I touch your hair? Can I touch your hair?" And then some guy is next to her. And then I'm standing there and looking at my friend. I'm like, she was harmless. She wasn't like, it wasn't like oh, God, let me touch you. And then she just started rambling about my hair and just kept talking to me. "Oh, your hair's so nice." And it was just like, it's just things like that. It's like, can I just be left alone to just go about my day and chill? But it's just not something that happens. So I'd say walking into town, and then clubs as well. Clubs is always a funny thing because when you walk in, me and my friends call it black man points, because for no reason, all your friends, my white friends, they'll just walk through the club. But for some reason, people think we're best mates because I'm black. I walk through the club. "Oh, how you doing, man? You doing good? Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. You heard about Stormzy and Skep?" And I'm like, yeah, calm. It's just silliness. It's just silliness. But yeah, that's what I'd say. I mean, it's never really been malicious at Newcastle. There's never been like a malicious kind of, "Oh, you're black, get out of here." No. It's more, never been around black people, and just the stares and yeah, and like, which is strange, out of character behavior that people might exhibit.
It brings us on to, I mean, Dami's kind of started the discussion really in some ways. I just wanted to talk about one of the main kind of demands that's now coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is around decolonizing the curriculum and the institution. So I guess my question is, and I guess, as I say, Dami has kind of started on it, but we can elaborate on this, is what does that look like for our film degree? What does decolonizing the curriculum mean, do you think, for the film degree? And secondly, for the institution, for the university?
I definitely think it's a process, but it's definitely attainable and achievable. So just listing off the everything. So kind of hiring Black film teachers, ensuring that there's a diverse amount of media that you guys are showing in the classes. So especially having, see, the thing about having conversations about race, you have to really know what you're doing, which is why I probably wouldn't advise it in such, because it can become a moment to be like, we are debating someone's existence versus talking about the importance of the Black narrative. So if it was like, we put on a Black film, we talk about it and be like, "Oh, they're talking about, I don't know, it could be anything." That's what's the beauty of it. It could be a Black documentary about cars and the connection with cars and things like that. So it's very much important for the lecturers, if they heard anything that came off as racist, to ensure that the students are all educated on why what they said was wrong, or ensuring that the conversation is educational but also not an environment for them to debate race and be like, oh, this isn't important to talk about and stuff like that, you know, making sure that it is a safe space. But I definitely think that, you know, and also having certain elements of the curriculum include Black books as well, because gosh, it feels like it's been so long since I've been on campus, but you know, when we have to make references and write essays and that kind of things, the reading list, that was it. Yeah, I remember the reading list would, if I can remember, would never have any Black writers and stuff like that. So I would have to find Black documentary writers to kind of connect to theories I was making, because that wasn't included in class. So definitely ensuring that the reading list is diverse as well. But yeah.
Yeah, good point. I mean, what about you, Warren? What's your take on this, on decolonizing the curriculum? And I mean, Dami didn't go on to it, but we can talk also about the institution as well. Maybe we can come back to you, Dami, and you can say what you think about decolonizing the institution.
Yeah.
What that looks like. So, Warren?
Yeah, I think in the classroom, guess the documentary is just, because, well, decolonizing, I'll start with the film program, and then I'll go to the institution. Because with the film program, it would be more about, I think generally it started to go in that direction, especially with world cinema, was definitely very good. People just enjoyed, I could tell people were actually enjoying a lot of the films on the program. Some of them weren't as receptive to, but I think it's a change from nothing. Do you know what I mean? Which is definitely a step in the right direction. Also, yeah, hiring Black film lecturers, but that's another problem. That's a problem with the institution, which I'll get onto. And then it's an understanding of history, mainly, because that's the main problem. And when we go to the institution, because when we ask if we want to decolonize education, there's so many things that have to be done, because it's not just at this institutional level, it's at a wider institutional level as well as that. Like, for example, why are there not as many Black film lecturers? Because PhDs are expensive to do if you don't have the capital, the money to pursue those degrees. And then that also goes back to education, Black people being discriminated in the education sector, and then that just leads to a knock-on effect throughout all institutional levels. So it's definitely, as Dami was saying, it's a multi-layered problem. But I think the film degree has gone in some way towards decolonization, and films like Mulade, especially, that was my favorite film that we watched.
Sembeni, yeah.
Top film. Those kind of films, that whole world cinema module is the start of a decolonized education system, 100%. It's very deliberate that we put that in the first year, and it's very deliberate that we put that in the first semester of the first year. And many people are shocked that on a documentary filmmaking course, in your first year, on your first semester, you're watching, films from around the world, fiction films from around the world. And I think, we know we've got a long way to go, but there is a sense in which to be a good filmmaker is to have open your mind, open your perspective, to open yourself up to the world and what the world has got to offer, and to break that hegemony of a kind of a white European American culture. So we've done that, not as consciously as part of a decolonizing the agenda thing,
but because I think that for us is an important part of being, a good filmmaker. And I think it speaks to one of the things that you said, that for me, one of the dangers of the decolonizing agenda is that it becomes a tick box exercise, which I think does nobody any justice, really. That it's a matter of just having some black films or films that deal with black subjects. Or as Dami said, now we're going to talk about race, students. That kind of very, very forced tick boxing, we've done it thing, rather than it's a holistic, multi-layered, embedding it in the culture, and making sure, the danger then, of course, it gets buried amongst everything else. But so I think it is about having a critical understanding of the world, of world history, of the place of everything. We've got a long way to go, but yeah, I'm glad that you picked that up and acknowledged that as a starting point anyway. Dami, did you want to say something more broadly about decolonizing the institution, the university?
I think the next big step would be definitely making the environment feel safer for students. Because I remember in my first year, my friends were part of the attack of the black students that had eggs thrown at them from students from Northumbria.
Yes.
Yeah, so my friends were involved in that, and one of them actually left the university because he didn't feel like he'd gotten much support. Because even though it wasn't Newcastle students that were causing the issue, it was Newcastle students who were victims of it, and it was very much one racist incident after another. And then you had the hockey team and their racial slurs. And we actually had a BAME attainment meeting with the heads of the student union earlier this year, I believe it was. And they told us what had happened to them. So they'd temporarily suspended the hockey team, so they'd missed a few matches. And they said, oh yeah, that would have been I don't think it was they didn't receive any kind of punishment. They weren't allowed to go to any away games, and they had to go on to a course to learn about why racism is bad. And while I was sitting there, I was very much, it felt like a slap on the wrist almost, because for them it's just, we've been temporarily suspended for a couple months, with a couple months being Christmas time, so they weren't going to play anyway, and then they just go and do a course. But for students like me who have to watch that video when it comes up on people's stories, or be there for your friends when they were just walking home and have people shout slurs at them and throw eggs at them, it's kind of like we are the ones that have to go through it and carry that weight on our shoulders. So I definitely think in terms of going forward, it's, as you said, it's definitely a process. This isn't something, you can't change an institution overnight, but you can change an institution over a period of time. But I definitely think the first step would be making the students safe, because if you're paying, I was born here, so I'm only paying about £40,000 to £50,000. But then when you have international students who are paying ads amount of money, it's very much, why aren't they being kept safe? Why isn't no one talked about where to go for mental health kind of things? I had to go to my friends who are also black, which is fine, but if I'm at this university, my safety should be a priority. So that is definitely, saying we have people who are from similar ethnic origins as you. They are trained to help you with these experiences, and also making sure that the students who do these, these terrible acts are properly dealt with, because you can't say you have a zero tolerance to racism and then not treat the racist experience, because then it just tells all the other students, we don't care. And then it continues. And then I guess the next step after that is just, even beyond the film degree, all the degrees, making sure that they are, decolonized, and look at themselves and be like, how much am I learning about myself, and how much am I learning about other cultures? So especially students in the medical who are learning dentistry and stuff like that, there's a lot wrong with their curriculums as well. History especially. I was in Central with my friend, and we're working on a project, and a guy who studies history at the university, he came up to me and he said that the reason why people from my country, I'm from Nigeria, have all these issues is because we're too reliant on the UK. And he started making reasons why slavery was a good thing. And I just remember having to text my friend underneath the table and be like, because she'd gone to the toilet, I was like, please come back, he's making me so uncomfortable. And even when they came back, he was still there just being like, I'm just sharing my opinion. And we asked him, where did you learn about this stuff? And he said, from history class. I'm like, the university is teaching you this. And apparently he has a bit of a reputation anyway, because he tries to get a rise out of people. But still, it's very much like, if he's learning this from the curriculum and no one is doing anything and he's still a student, you know, that is, you know, terrible, because it's not just me it's happening to, it's everything. So definitely, yeah, making sure the students are safe and making sure that this is an educational environment where people are being taught to learn more about the degrees and be better humans. Yeah, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We've got about 5 minutes before we need to wrap up. So I'm just going to move it on. But before I do, because this is such an important subject area, aspect of our discussion, I just wanted to see if there's anything else that you wanted to add to what's been said before we kind of look more to the future. Is there anything else that you want to sort of add?
Warren, do you want to go first? Because I think I talked a lot in the last one.
No, you're speaking facts in the last one, definitely. But I mean, just the story that you gave there about the guy on the history program, you really start to question, what are the university's motives? That people with these views are, in a way, are a product of the program. What is on that course? Does anybody know what's on that course? And one thing I ask myself frequently is, what is going on? What is going on? It doesn't make any sense. And this, people feeling unsafe, people feeling uncomfortable. The hockey team as well, which is one thing that we were doing Stand Up to Racism. It's yeah, there's a ways to go, but we're on the way to go. If that, yeah, we're on that way.
Dami, do you want to come back on anything or elaborate on any points before we move on?
No, I think it would just be, yeah, nice to see the change that we've been talking about, and hopefully, because I actually don't know how the curriculum itself is changed at the meetings you guys have to have and writing up all the new curriculum sheets, but I'd be happy to help out if anything, finding the documentaries to watch and stuff, because it's just, yeah, making sure that the next cohort, there's a lot of representation for them, I think.
I mean, that's a very good point. Because unlike schools, which have to work to a national curriculum and therefore they're kind of restricted in what they can teach, at universities, actually, we can pretty much teach what we want, which makes it even more damning in some ways when you hear the stories about history, because that means we're choosing to teach history in particular ways.
Yeah.
So, but it gives us, we do have, I mean, that's, for me, that's a joy of university education. It kind of, we have that freedom and flexibility to, so long as it's of, rigorous academic standards. It's not just about climbing on hobby horses, but we have a fair amount of control over what we teach. So therefore, we are going through a process at the moment of review. We've just started, because we've just come out of the whole last year really of marking, and now we're beginning to look towards next year and reviewing our curriculum. And definitely we want student voice, we want your voice to be heard as we're kind of reshaping our curriculum. So we'll definitely get in touch and take things forward in that way. Okay, so then just the final kind of set of questions really is around coming back to a bit about you as, and how you see your career developing from here. What are, I want to keep the discussion focused on two things really. One is about how you see things developing for yourself as students, as potential filmmakers, but then how do you perceive the world out there to be in terms of some of the problems and barriers So I guess that comes down to the fact, what would you like to do after leaving university? Where do you see yourself going afterwards? I mean, I know, Warren, you're still in your first year, but it will fly past, mate. And we know that it's going to go past really, really quickly. But you're entering into a world which is, changing a lot. But it's also an industry, the film industry. There was a report that came out a few days ago, which again reaffirmed what we all kind of know. We've talked a bit about it, but there is kind of racism within the film industry, that the opportunities particularly for Black people, especially for Black women, are much less, and the barriers are there. So I just wanted to get a sense of, how you see the next steps for you, and what you see, and how you perceive the kind of the prevalence of racism within the industry, and how that's going to affect your journey.
So
go on, Dami, you go.
For me, it's I definitely want to be creating more. I know I keep saying this word, but just creating more Black representation in all different types of ways. Whether that's through photography. I love interviewing people, so kind of that kind of interview style, talking to people. And then for documentaries, it would definitely be talking about the stories that the world doesn't really show but always exist, talking about, because I'm from Southeast London, talking about all the Black kids who grew up there and what our experience is like, or talking about Black people who have different, because I think there's especially when you watch TV today, fictional TV, it's very much there's this one type of Black person that they show, and that narrative is so important to show, but at the same time you don't want people to be like, this is the only way Black people can be. You want to share that narrative and all the other narratives so people know the Black culture and the Black narrative is multi-dimensional. So we can be loud, we can be rightfully loud in that sense, because we're always being silent. We can be quiet also, and shy and excited, and also in terms of clothing even, just we can wear whatever we want to wear and be ingrained in so many different communities, like Black and the LGBT community, or Black and mental health, which meant Black and mental health is very rarely ever talked about. So I think, going on from post-graduation now until post-graduation and beyond that would be definitely analysing the Black narrative and being like, if that story exists and that person exists, we're going to tell that story. But that's it.
Excellent. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And Warren?
As you said, I'm looking to the future, probably trying to get internships at certain companies, and looking to work. That's the future isn't as certain, especially with the economy that we'll be graduating into. It's not going to be the best, but it's more of a I'm more of a person that sees where it goes. So
much more in the moment. There's a battle to be won now. Let's win this, and then see what the terrain is like after that.
Pretty much.
That's great. But would you, broadly, it's maybe a silly question in some ways, but are you optimistic or pessimistic? Where would you put yourself, about the future, given everything that's happened historically and the scale of, what's facing us historically? And then, of course, there is this moment now. Would you say that you're optimistic or pessimistic, or where would you place yourself for the future on that scale? Dami?
I would say I'm a mix of both. I'm trying to remain as optimistic as possible, because I have a lot of anxiety about a lot of things that I can and can't control. So it's very much that you look at the statistics of people who are unemployed post out of uni and the kind of mental health that follows from that, because you do this degree, you focus on just that, and then getting a job in that specific field, whatever the degree is either extremely competitive or just, you want to find the ideal job for you. So I'm there is a bit of worry in that, like, will I graduate and have no money, and all that kind of thing. But also looking at the university's employment rate post-graduation, it does seem quite promising. So I'm trying to focus on that, and also making sure that is in my control right now, that I'm doing as much as I can. So, you know, for mentoring, trying to get other people to mentor me, you know, focusing in class and doing my own personal projects as well, and just being like, okay, whatever happens at the university happens, but also making sure that I'm in spaces that don't discriminate against me, which is another big thing, because it's like, if racism didn't exist, then it would just be a complete like level playing field, but that's not the case. So that is a worry at the back of your mind, like, I have all these stories to share, but will these people not employ me because my existence is too political for them? And that's not something I'm very quiet about. You know, if I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna talk about it. But yeah, it's kind of a mix between, both, a mixed feeling, just trying to do what I can and hoping that it works out in the end, I think.
I think they call that being realistic as a kind of, what about you, Warren? How would you respond to this question?
I'd say, yeah, as you were saying, the scale of the problems are extremely large. But our capacity to deal with them is also growing ever larger. So I'd say I've got some optimism, some kind of optimism, but there's still quite a lot of pessimism, because the scale of the problem really is that big. It really is quite wide and far-reaching and deep, and embedded in the social fabric. So, as Dami was saying, you have to have a bit of both. Be realistic, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's because it's so ingrained and so historically kind of rooted. It's sometimes almost impossible to imagine how it could be any other way. And because all of our energy and all of our resources are about resistance and fighting what is, the injustices, that sometimes, we kind of forget about how it could be. And I think that's really, really important. That's why we need to look to the future. And I think what Dami says, imagine if there was no racism, how would my life chances be affected? And it's like, the fact that we still have to say that is that's kind of very pessimistic. But that I think that leap of imagination is a challenge that we all have to make. And I think we should do it because it prompts us to think it doesn't have to be this way. So then it's a question of how do we make the change? How do we make that change that we are? Ultimately, it's a human society made by humans. So humans can change this society. Fortunately, I mean, it's been fantastic talking to you both. I've really, really enjoyed it, and kind of learned loads. And I think hopefully this will be the start of a conversation. One thing, I just want to leave you with. There's one of my favorite phrases is by Antonio Gramsci, who's an Italian Marxist, on this question of optimism and pessimism. And in some ways, he would say, I reject the question, this optimism, pessimism thing. And I think both of you kind of rejected that by saying, it's a question of being realistic, understanding the opportunities but understanding the challenges, and that's how you operate. But Gramsci said something which I thought was really important and which I operate by, which is this idea of, it's about pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the will. Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. So, pessimism of the intellect because the scale of the problem, but optimism of the will is that you're going to give everything to make the change, both on the personal level, but also on a social level. And I think, in a sense, that's what both of you are doing. This kind of understanding that you have of the problems, but also the engagement. That both of you are actively engaged in all sorts of ways in being part of the solution to the problem. And I think that's a challenge to us all: is to join you and be part of the solution to the problem. And talking about it, I think, is obviously the first step, but it shouldn't be the end point. It's the step before the action. So I just want to, again, thank you both. It's been brilliant. And, one thing I'm sure of is that you two are going to be inspirational figures for a whole generation of Black kids that are going to be coming up and looking to make their way, in the world of filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, photography, or whatever. It's clear to me that you two are both really, really talented students that have got something to say, and that you're going to say it, and our job is to help you say what you need to say. So thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much for taking the time. I
Thanks
really
a lot.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having us.
Okay.
Thank you so
Dami.
much.
Bye-bye, Dami.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye.
Warren. Yeah, bye.